The wind howled across the white planet, cutting through the silence like a sharp blade. Snow covered everything. The sky was gray, and the storm made it hard to see. Ryan, a human engineer, walked slowly through the deep snow. His thick jacket and helmet kept him warm, but even he could feel the cold starting to bite. He was on a remote colony planet, far from Earth. His job was to check and fix the weather tower. It had stopped sending signals 3 days ago. Ryan knew the tower was old and frozen, but he didn't expect much trouble. Still, the storm was worse than he had planned for. He reached the tower and began his work. As he checked the sensors, a weak sound reached his ears, almost like a whisper. He stopped and looked around. The sound came again, soft and strange. It didn't sound like the wind. It sounded like a cry. Ryan moved toward the noise, stepping carefully through the snow. Then he saw something small near the edge of a rock. It was barely moving. At first, he thought it was just frozen cloth, but as he got closer, his heart jumped. It was not cloth. It was a body, a small body, curled up tightly. He dropped to his knees. It was a girl, an alien girl. Her skin was pale blue with a faint purple tone. Her arms were thin and her fingers looked stiff from the cold. She had small, elf-like ears and a soft face. Her eyes were shut and her lips had turned blue. She wasn't wearing the right clothes for this kind of weather, just a thin suit that offered no warmth. Her tiny body was shaking. Ryan touched her cheek. She was cold, very cold, but there was still a weak breath. "She's alive," he whispered. He didn't wait. He took off his outer coat and wrapped it around her. Then he gently picked her up, in his arms. She was light, like a feather. She didn't wake up. Her head rested against his chest, and he could feel her breathing, slow but steady. Ryan carried her back to his small outpost. It was only a short walk away, but with the storm and the weight in his arms, it felt longer. His boots crunched through the ice. Snow hit his helmet. He moved quickly, holding her close, trying to share his body heat. Inside the outpost, he laid her down on the soft bed near the heater. He turned the heat up and brought every warm blanket he had. He wrapped her carefully and placed a heating pad near her feet. Her skin was still cold and she didn't wake up. "Come on, don't give up," he said quietly. He opened a medical kit and checked for signs of frostbite. Her fingers were blue but not black. That gave him hope. He placed warm packs in her hands and gently rubbed them to bring back feeling. Hours passed. The storm outside kept blowing strong. Ryan stayed beside her the whole time. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He just watched her and waited. At one point, her fingers moved slightly. Her chest rose a little faster. Her lips lost some of the blue color. Ryan leaned closer. Her eyes opened, just a little. They were a soft violet, like gentle stars in the night. She looked at him, confused and afraid. "It's okay," Ryan said in a calm voice. "You're safe now." She blinked slowly. Her lips moved, but no words came out. She tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. "Don't move yet," Ryan said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You need to rest." She didn't understand his words, but his voice was kind. She looked around the small room, the heater, the soft lights, and then back at him. Her eyes filled with tears. Ryan wasn't sure why. Maybe she thought she was going to die. Maybe she didn't expect someone to help her. He smiled gently and reached for a cup. He filled it with warm water and helped her sip. She drank slowly, her hands still shaking. She looked like she hadn't had anything warm in a long time. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed to her chest and said one word very quietly. "Lyra." Ryan nodded. "Lyra, I'm Ryan." She looked at him and tried to repeat it. "Ryan." Her voice was soft, barely there, but she said it. Ryan felt a strange warmth in his chest. He didn't know who she was or where she came from. But in that moment, he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let her freeze again. He moved a chair close to the bed and sat down. Lyra's eyes began to close again, this time slowly, peacefully. Her body relaxed under the blankets. She was safe now. Outside, the storm still raged, but inside the outpost, for the first time in days, there was a little warmth and a little hope. When Lyra opened her eyes again, the storm was gone. The sky outside was still white, but the wind had stopped. Sunlight came through the window, making the room glow gently. It was the first peaceful morning in many days. Ryan was asleep in the chair next to the bed, his head resting on the wall. He looked tired, but his face was calm. Lyra turned her head slowly and looked around. She was still weak, but her body felt warmer now. The soft blankets, the heater, and the quiet space made her feel safe. Her stomach made a soft noise. She hadn't eaten in a long time. She tried to sit up, and the movement woke Ryan. His eyes opened quickly, and when he saw her awake, a small smile appeared on his face. "You're up," he said kindly. "That's good." Lyra gave a small nod. She looked at him with curious eyes. There was still fear in them, but less than before. She touched her chest again and said, "Lyra." Ryan smiled. "Yes, Lyra. You remember?" Then he pointed to himself. "Ryan." She tried to say it again. "Ryan." "Perfect," he said. "You're learning fast." He stood up and walked to the kitchen area. It was small, with only a few supplies. He poured warm soup into a cup and brought it to her. She took it slowly with both hands. The warmth made her smile a little. She sipped carefully, and the taste made her eyes widen. It was simple soup, but for someone who had been cold and hungry, it felt like a treasure. Ryan watched her quietly. He could see the change in her already. She was still pale and weak, but her hands didn't shake as much now. Her eyes were clearer. She looked around the room with more interest. He brought over a small tablet and sat beside her. On the screen, he opened a simple drawing app. He drew a stick figure and pointed to himself. "Ryan." Then he drew a smaller figure with pointy ears and soft hair. He pointed to her. "Lyra." She smiled again and nodded. Then Ryan drew a snowflake and pointed outside. Lyra nodded slowly and made a shivering motion. She understood. He then drew a broken ship. She looked at the picture and became quiet. Her smile faded. Her eyes dropped to the blanket, Ryan noticed. He gently touched her hand. "It's okay," he said, even though she didn't understand the words. "You're safe now." She looked at him again, eyes filled with something deep. Maybe sadness, maybe thanks. Ryan didn't push her. He let her rest. Over the next few days, Lyra got stronger. She began walking slowly around the outpost, exploring corners and touching different tools. Everything was new to her. She jumped the first time the door slid open. She giggled when Ryan showed her how to use a spoon properly. She repeated words after him, practicing with each meal. "Hot," she said once, pointing at her cup. "Right," Ryan nodded. "Warm," she said, pointing to the heater. "You got it." He smiled. She even began to laugh. Not often, and not loudly, but small sounds of joy filled the room from time to time. Ryan felt proud. She was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to live again. One evening, Ryan sat down and opened a file of old maps on his tablet. He turned it toward Lyra and pointed. "Where are you from?" he asked. She looked at the screen. Her eyes moved slowly across the stars and planet names. Then she pointed at an empty area. No name, no marks. Ryan frowned. "There?" She nodded, once, then made an X with her fingers and shook her head. Her face turned sad. Ryan understood. That place was gone, or maybe she didn't want to go back. He nodded gently and said, "Okay." That night, Lyra had trouble sleeping. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the window. Ryan noticed and walked over. He sat beside her, not saying anything. She pointed at the stars and whispered something in her own language. He didn't know the words, but he could feel the pain in her voice. He placed a soft blanket over her shoulders and stayed there quietly. The next day, something strange happened. As Ryan stepped outside to check the fuel tanks, he noticed something small and metallic blinking in the snow. He picked it up. It was a drone, a tiny one, about the size of his hand. Its light blinked once and then stopped. His heart sank. He ran back inside and showed it to Lyra. The moment she saw it, her face turned pale again. Her hands trembled. She backed away from the drone like it was poison. "What is it?" Ryan asked. Lyra pointed outside and said, one clear word: danger. Ryan knew something was wrong. Someone was looking for her. Ryan placed the small drone on the table. It looked harmless, like a toy, but Lyra's reaction told a different story. Her hands were shaking again. Her eyes stayed locked on the blinking light as if it could hurt her just by being close. "It's off now," Ryan said gently, trying to calm her. "It can't do anything." Lyra slowly walked to the far corner of the room and sat down, pulling her knees to her chest. She was afraid, more than he had seen since the night he found her, in the snow. Ryan walked to the window and stared out at the cold landscape. The snow had stopped falling, but the silence outside now felt heavy. Someone had sent the drone. That meant someone knew Lyra was here. And whoever it was, Lyra didn't want them to find her. Ryan sat across from her and opened the tablet again. He drew a picture of the drone, then pointed at her. "Who?" he asked softly. Lyra looked down, then reached for the tablet. With shaky fingers, she drew a tall building with a fence around it. Inside the fence, she drew small figures, some lying down, others with lines around their wrists and ankles. Ryan understood the picture. It was a prison or a lab. She drew one figure alone outside the fence. Then she drew a line showing the figure running away. "Did you escape?" Ryan asked, pointing. She nodded slowly. Ryan's chest tightened. So that's why she had been out there in the snow. She wasn't just lost, she had run away from somewhere terrible. And now they were looking for her. Lyra looked up at him and said softly, "Bad people." "I believe you," Ryan replied. He stood up and began packing supplies. If someone was coming, they couldn't stay here. The outpost was too small, too easy to find. Lyra watched him move around the room, confused at first. Then she stood up and touched his arm. "Go?" she asked. "Yes," Ryan said. "We're leaving." He checked the small rover outside. It had just enough fuel to reach a human research station 2 days away, through a mountain pass. It wouldn't be an easy trip, but it was their best chance. By nightfall, everything was ready. Ryan gave Lyra his warmest coat and boots, even though they were too big. He adjusted the rover's seat for her small frame and loaded food, water, and blankets. Before they left, Ryan picked up the drone again. He pulled out its power core and smashed it with a hammer just to be sure. Then he dropped it into the snow and covered it with ice. "No more tracking," he said firmly. The rover rolled out into the cold night. The stars above were clear, and the moonlight made the snow shine. Lyra sat quietly beside him, her hands tucked into the sleeves of the coat. She stared ahead, trying to be brave. Ryan looked at her and smiled. "We'll be okay." Lyra looked at him, then nodded once. The first few hours were peaceful. They drove across the flat plains, the engine humming softly. Ryan talked to her about the stars, the base they were going to, and Earth. He knew she didn't understand everything, but she listened closely. At one point, she smiled and said, "Earth, blue." Ryan laughed. "Yes, very blue." But the peace didn't last. Just before sunrise, a sound broke the silence, a sharp buzz from the sky. Ryan stopped the rover and looked up. A second drone, larger than the first one, was flying overhead. It moved slowly, scanning the ground. Lyra grabbed his arm. Her eyes were wide with fear. Ryan turned the rover around and drove toward the hills. If they could hide in the rocky pass, the drone might lose them. The rover bounced over the rough ground. Snow flying in every direction. Lyra held onto her seat tightly. Behind them, the drone followed. It didn't fire, it just watched. Ryan drove faster. The mountains were getting closer. The narrow paths and sharp turns would give them cover. "We're almost there," he said, even though his heart was racing. As they entered the pass, the drone stopped following and circled far behind them. Ryan sighed in relief. Maybe it had lost the signal. Maybe they had a little more time. They parked the rover in a hidden spot between two tall rocks. Ryan shut it down to save power. He and Lyra stayed inside, wrapped in blankets. The cold was still strong, but the small heater in the rover helped. Lyra looked tired. She leaned against his shoulder and whispered, "Thank you." Ryan looked down at her. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just doing what's right." She smiled a little, then closed her eyes. Outside, the wind returned, brushing across the mountains. Ryan knew their journey wasn't over. Someone still wanted Lyra back, but as long as she was with him, he would protect her. She had suffered enough, and now she had someone who cared. The sun rose slowly over the white mountains. Snow covered the peaks, and the cold air blew softly through the rocks. The rover stayed hidden between tall stone walls. Inside, Ryan and Lyra sat close together, wrapped in blankets. Lyra had fallen, asleep for a few hours. Her head rested on Ryan's shoulder. Her breathing was calm now. After days of fear, she looked at peace. Ryan didn't move. He stayed still and watched the sunrise through the window. He knew they couldn't stay here for long. The drone had seen them. Maybe more were coming. They had to keep moving. But for a few minutes, he let the quiet moment last. Lyra woke up, slowly. She rubbed her eyes and looked around. When she saw Ryan, she gave him a small smile. "Morning," Ryan said gently. She tried to say it back. "Morning," he smiled. "You're getting better." He gave her warm water and a small food bar. She ate quietly, then looked out the window. "Safe?" she asked. Ryan didn't lie. "Not yet, but soon." They started the rover again and continued through the mountain pass. The road was narrow and rough. Sometimes they had to stop and move, rocks out of the way. Ryan drove carefully, but he knew they were still being watched. At noon, Lyra pointed to something in the sky. Another drone, this one even bigger. It flew high above, but it didn't attack. It just followed from a distance. Lyra looked nervous again. She whispered, "They come." Ryan held the wheel tighter. "Not if I can help it." He pushed the rover faster. They passed through icy tunnels and frozen caves. The wind howled outside, but inside the rover they stayed warm. Lyra didn't speak much, but she kept watching the sky. That evening, Ryan stopped the rover to rest. The fuel was getting low. They had one more day to reach the human base. If they didn't make it by then, they would be stuck. He checked the map on his tablet. "We're close," he told Lyra. "Just one more long drive." Lyra nodded slowly. Then she pointed at the tablet and made a sad face. Ryan looked at her. "What is it?" She took the tablet and drew again. This time, she drew her people, small, figures like herself. She showed them inside cages. Then she drew a human ship and a large building. She pointed at one of the cages and made a scared sound. Ryan understood. "They took your people?" She nodded. He sat beside her in silence. She was not just a lost girl, she was a survivor. She had escaped something dark, something cruel, and now she was trying to protect others too. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know." She looked at him and placed her hand on his chest. "You help." He nodded. "I will." That night, Ryan heard a sound outside. He looked through the small window and saw lights in the sky. A ship, dark, quiet, and smooth. It wasn't human. It flew above the mountains and stopped near a ridge. Ryan woke Lyra quickly. "We have to move," he said. She saw the ship and froze. Her hands shook. Them! Ryan grabbed supplies, started the rover, and drove toward the narrow path on the other side of the ridge. The ship stayed still at first, but when the rover moved, its lights began to follow. The chase began. Ryan pushed the rover to its limit. Snow flew in every direction as the wheels bounced over rocks and ice. The alien ship followed from above, scanning the area with red lights. Lyra held tight to the seat, her eyes wide. "We're going to make it," Ryan shouted. He turned the rover into a small valley, hoping to lose the ship. But a blast of light hit the ground nearby, shaking the whole vehicle. "They're trying to stop us," Ryan said. He turned again, entering a rocky path between cliffs. The ship had trouble flying between the tight walls. Ryan used every trick he knew to stay ahead. At last, they reached the other side of the valley. The human base was just visible in the distance, a tall metal tower with a glowing signal light. "There. It is," Ryan said with hope. Lyra leaned forward. "Home? For you now, yes." As they neared the base, the alien ship slowed down. It hovered far away, watching but not moving closer. "They don't want to be seen by humans," Ryan said. "Good." The base gate opened as the rover approached. Soldiers came out ready to help. Ryan waved them down. "She needs help," he called out. Doctors and techs rushed forward. They gently lifted Lyra and brought her inside. Ryan followed, tired but relieved. Inside, the warm lights of the base made everything feel safe. Lyra looked around, amazed. She was finally in a place where she didn't have to run. She looked at Ryan one more time and whispered, "Thank you." Ryan, he smiled. "You're welcome." Lyra lay on a soft bed inside the human research base. The room was warm and bright. Machines quietly beeped, watching her health. A doctor checked her pulse and smiled. She was getting stronger every day. Ryan sat by her side, holding her small hand gently. Lyra looked peaceful now. No more fear, no more cold. "Do you remember where you came from?" Ryan asked softly. Lyra nodded slowly. She tried to speak, but her voice was weak. "Earth," she whispered. Ryan smiled. "Not yet. But soon, you'll see many stars and planets." Lyra's violet eyes shone with hope. Days passed, and Lyra learned more about the human world. She practiced English every day with Ryan. He showed her books, pictures, and videos. Lyra loved the stories about Earth's forests, oceans, and mountains. She told Ryan about her home, a place of blue light and soft wines. She spoke of her people, small and gentle, who loved peace. But sometimes sadness returned. At night, Lyra would wake and look scared. Ryan stayed with her, comforting her with soft words and warmth. One morning, the base commander visited Ryan and Lyra. He was a tall man with kind eyes. "We want to help her," he said. "She will be safe here." Ryan nodded. "She's been through much. She deserves peace." The commander smiled. "We will protect her and learn from her story." Lyra watched the commander. For the first time, she felt trust for others besides Ryan. Weeks turned into months. Lyra grew stronger and happier. She walked outside the base, feeling the sun and the fresh air. She laughed and played like a child again. Ryan taught her to climb trees and look at the stars. One evening, they sat on a hill overlooking the base. The sky was full of stars. Lyra held Ryan's hand. "Thank you," she said clearly. "You gave me warmth. You gave me hope." Ryan looked at her and smiled. "You gave me something too. Courage to care." They both knew their journey was just beginning. The galaxy was wide and unknown, but together they could face anything. Lyra's tiny body had once turned blue from cold. Now, surrounded by warmth and friendship, she was ready to live and to dream. The future was bright.